This video is to introduce the concept of overlearning and where you as a teacher could apply this method for learning consolidation and skill retention. So what is overlearning? What is it used for? How do I use it? And what are the advantages and disadvantages to overlearning? First things first, what is overlearning? Overlearning is when students practice a skill at a higher level that is required for assessment. There are two types of overlearning: 100% overlearning, which entails completing the same number of trials it took to get to a certain achievement standard or assessment standard, and 50%, which is where you practice half the amount of trials it took to get to that same standards. For example, for an assessment, the student needs to achieve 5 out of 10 successful 3-point throws of basketball in order to pass. If it takes a student 6 sets of 10 to reach 5 successful 3-point throws, then they would practice another 6 trials or sets of 10 throws. In 50% overlearning, they would only complete 3 sets or trials of 10 throws to consolidate learning. So what is overlearning used for? As previously mentioned, overlearning is used for skill retention and to consolidate learning. It can also be used with students who haven't practiced a skill over a long period of time to refresh their memory, also known as refresher practice. How or when is it used? Overlearning is generally practiced either at the beginning of a lesson, at the end of the lesson, or could even encompass both beginning and end. Overlearning immediately after practice sessions or the lesson is just as effective as a refresher practice, which is mainly used when skills haven't been practiced for a prolonged period of time, such as time over the school holidays or camps. This is basically a summary of the previous lessons with a few points, tips, or info to remember that are needed for the current lesson. Overlearning at the end of the session allows students to consolidate their learning of the skill and provide feedback for later sessions. Advantages and disadvantages to overlearning. Overlearning has its advantages, such as continual progression of skill acquisition and skill retention. However, there are some disadvantages also. This relates to the constraints of time, as overlearning or refresher practice takes valuable time, which may not be available to you. Teachers need to consider how important skill retention is to the learning outcomes of the lesson and/or the assessment, or if a test of retention could be conducted later in the HPE continuum. Instructors need to note that even though overlearning has its educational advantages, overlearning could mean time taken away from learning and practicing other skills. As mentioned in the amount of practice video, where a table was displayed showing effective time management and ineffective time management, teachers need to consider how important it is to reinforce learning by refreshing their minds from the previous lessons before getting the actual lesson. The more refresher practice that is conducted in lessons means the less class practice you will have for the actual lesson. Perhaps only doing refresher practice every few weeks may be beneficial and adaptable to your weekly class schedule. However, this will change from one school to another. Also, you need to consider that older students will remember previous lessons much quicker and easier than younger students. Overlearning is easily adaptable for skills that are static, such as 3-point throws or throwing and kicking and batting, and not in a game context. However, if you were to try and apply overlearning in a game context, it would take a substantial amount of time to hit the right amount of trials required for overlearning to occur. Play around with this technique and see what happens with your students and find out what works best for you.